The metal floor was cold beneath Mina's bare feet. Her hands were tied behind her back, and the guards on either side of her walked with sharp, steady steps. Their armor made a soft clinking sound with every movement, echoing down the long hallway of the ship. Mina didn't look at them. She kept her eyes forward. Her lips were dry, her face bruised, but she didn't show fear. Not anymore. She had cried all her tears in the holding cell during the first 2 nights, alone, with nothing but silence and cold air around her. Now, she was being taken to the tribunal. The ship, the Orcs will, was one of the largest Dravari warships in orbit. The Dravari were not kind rulers. They were tall, with thick gray-green scales and golden eyes that seemed to look through anything. They had conquered many planets, and Earth had been their latest victory. But Earth had not given up easily, even now, after cities were taken and governments had fallen. Small groups of humans still fought back. Mina had been one of them. She wasn't a soldier. Not really. She was only 19, once a medical student in a quiet town. But war doesn't care about age. It finds you, even in peaceful places. She had joined the resistance when her younger brother was taken. During a raid, she never found him again. What she found instead was a mission. She had carried secret codes to a human team hiding in the mountains. It had almost worked out. A Dravari scout ship had caught her. They found the codes hidden in her boot. She had been brought to this ship as a prisoner, a spy, and in the eyes of the Dravari, a liar. The heavy door opened with a hiss. Bright white lights filled the large hall. At the far end sat 3 Dravari judges, higher ranking than the others. They wore long black robes with gold trim. In the center of them stood Commander Kral. Kral was tall, even for a Dravari. His scales had a dark green shine under the lights, and his eyes were sharp, unblinking. His voice, when he spoke, was slow and deep. "Bring her forward," he said. The guards pushed Mina gently, but firmly. She walked ahead, keeping her chin up. Her legs were sore from days in the cell. Her lips still hurt where a guard had struck her when she refused to eat, but she would not show weakness here. Kral looked at her in silence for a moment. Then he said, "You are human. You are young. And yet, your actions have cost my people lives." Mina didn't answer. "You carry codes meant to destroy one of our outposts," he continued. "Do you deny this?" Still, she said nothing. There was nothing to deny. They knew the truth. She had nothing else to give them. No more secrets. No more plans. One of the judges leaned forward. "She is dangerous, even in silence. Her kind is clever." Kral nodded. "Yes, clever. Too clever, perhaps, but not wise." He stepped down from the platform and walked slowly toward her. The guard stepped aside. Mina didn't move as he came closer. She could see the thin scars on his jaw. He had fought before, likely in many wars. There was a strange calm about him, like a storm held tightly inside. "You are not what I expected," he said at last. "You're small, quiet. Why do your people fight so hard? You must know you cannot win." Mina looked up at him. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Because we still have something worth fighting for." Kral's eyes narrowed. "And what is that?" She didn't answer again. There was no need to. He would not understand. Not yet. He stared at her a moment. Longer, then turned away. "Take her back to the cell. I want her watched closely. No more injuries." The guards nodded and took her arms. As they turned to leave, Kral spoke once more, this time more to himself than to her. "Humans, you lose everything, and still you hold your heads high." Curious, back in her cell, Mina sat on the cold floor and looked at the stars through the small grated window. She wondered if anyone back on Earth knew she was alive. She wondered if the resistance had survived without the codes she failed to deliver. Most of all, she wondered what would come next. Hours passed. The lights outside her cell dimmed, signaling night aboard the ship. Sleep did not come easily. Her leg ached, her stomach growled, but she closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She had done what she could. She had not screamed. She had not begged. And somehow, she felt that mattered. The next morning, the ship was quiet outside the prisoner bay. The sound of footsteps echoed down the halls. A young Dravari warrior named Thrun stood outside Mina's cell, reading the report on a small screen in his hand. He was tall, with dark gray scales and sharp yellow eyes. His armor was clean, his hands strong, and his face showed no emotion. Thrun was not like Commander Krall. Krall had seen many battles and learned patience. Thrun was still learning. He wanted to prove himself. He believed strength came from fear, and fear came from control. That morning, Krall had given him a task: speak with the prisoner. Krall had said, "I want to know what she knows. If she refuses, make her talk." Thrun had bowed and accepted the command. Now he stood outside the cell, watching the human girl sit in the corner. Her arms were tied in front of her. Her head was down. She looked weak, to thin, to quiet. But Thrun had read the report. This girl had helped destroy one of their listening towers on Earth. She was part of resistance. Clever and dangerous, he pressed a button, and the cell door slid open with a soft hiss. Mina didn't look up. Thrun stepped inside and stood in front of her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "You will answer my questions. If you don't, there will be pain." Mina slowly raised her head. Her eyes met his, calm but tired. She didn't speak. Thrun didn't like silence. Silence was not useful. "Where are the other humans hiding?" he asked. "Tell me, and you will be treated better." Still, she didn't speak. Thrun's fingers tightened on the handle of the stun rod at his side. It was small, but powerful, made to cause pain without serious injury. He had used it before. He pulled it from his belt, stepped forward, and struck her leg. There was a sharp crack of energy, followed by a soft gasp. But no scream, no shout, no begging. Just one small sound, a breath of pain. Then silence again. Mina curled slightly, holding her leg, but she didn't look at him. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed quiet. Thrun waited. He thought she would break. Most did. But she simply sat there, her shoulders trembling just a little. He had expected anger, rage, a loud response, but all he saw were quiet tears, falling, slow and steady, onto the cold floor. Something in Thrun's chest felt strange. He turned away. "I will return tomorrow," he said, trying to keep his voice hard. "You will speak then." He stepped out of the cell and closed the door behind him. Later that evening, Thrun sat alone in the training room. He had a practice blade in his hand, but he wasn't training. His mind was somewhere else. He kept thinking about the girl, about the look in her eyes, about the way she didn't scream, not even once. He had seen many prisoners. Some shouted, some begged, some lied. This girl had done none of those things. She had simply cried. Not for mercy. Not for release. Just quiet tears. Why did that bother him? He looked down at his claws, strong, sharp, trained for war. But for the first time, he felt unsure of their purpose. The next day, Thrun returned to Mina's cell. She was sitting again, back against the wall, one leg stretched out in front of her. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked tired, but she still held her head up. Thrun stood for a moment before speaking. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said this time. Mina raised her eyebrows slightly. "That's new." Her voice was dry, but steady. She hadn't spoken before. Now she had. Thrun stepped closer, but kept the stun rod at his side. "You helped the resistance. Why?" She looked at him. "Because someone had to." Thrun frowned. "You think you can win against us?" "No," she said quietly. "But we don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because it's right." Thrun didn't understand. "You will lose everything." Mina looked at the small window. Above her, "We already have." Her words were simple, but they hit something inside him. He sat down across from her, just outside the reach of her tied hands. "What did you lose?" Mina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My brother." Thrun tilted his head. "In battle, in a raid," she said. "He was 10. Thrun looked down. He didn't know what to say. He had no brothers. He had been raised in a war camp, trained from a young age to fight, obey, and win. He had never stopped to wonder what it would be like to lose someone like that. "I'm sorry," he said. Surprising himself, Minna blinked. Why would you be sorry? You're part of them. Thrun didn't answer, maybe because he wasn't sure anymore who them really was. When he left the cell that day, he didn't take his usual path back. Instead, he walked to the observation deck. There, through the glass, Earth was visible, blue, green, and beautiful. The clouds moved gently. Across the surface, he had never been to the surface, only fought in orbit, only learned about the humans from reports and training videos. But now he wondered if those reports were wrong. He thought about Mina's eyes, about her tears, about her silence. They said humans were weak. But maybe strength wasn't only loud. Maybe. Sometimes strength was quiet and still standing, even when the world tried to break you. The ship was quiet again. Outside Mina's cell, the lights stayed dim. The air felt heavier than before. Thrun stood in the dark room beside the security station. His eyes focused on the large screen in front of him. The footage from Earth played. Silently, he had watched it before, hundreds of times. Battles, fires, humans running, shouting, fighting. But this time, he watched something different. A recording from a small town, just before one of the first attacks. In the video, a human woman placed a coat on a stranger's shoulders. A group of children shared bread. Even though it was clear they had little, soldiers helped old people escape through flooded streets. And through it all, no one ran alone. This surprised him. The training he had received taught him that humans were chaotic, selfish, wild, dangerous when cornered. But this video showed something else. Even in fear, they held on to one another. Even when losing, they still helped. Thrun leaned closer to the screen. He paused the video on a still image. A young man carrying an injured child through a burning street. The man's eyes were full of pain, but his grip was strong. Something inside Thrun tightened. He remembered the look in Mina's eyes. That same quiet strength. That same pain. He turned off the screen. Later, Thrun returned to the cell. Mina was awake, sitting with her back to the wall. She had used a small piece of charcoal from the bottom of her food tray to draw lines on the floor. They weren't random. They looked like a pattern, careful and thoughtful. Thrun stepped inside. What are you drawing? Mina didn't look up at first. A map. He came closer. Of what? Not of places, she said softly. Of memories. Now Thrun was curious. He sat down across from her, just like before. Mina pointed to one part of the floor. This line is where I used to walk. To school. I was 5. I remember the sound of birds, and how the sidewalk cracked under the old tree. She moved her finger to another line. This one is the hospital. I trained there. I wanted to help people. I still do. Then she stopped, at a spot shaped like a circle. And this is the park where I last saw my brother. He ran ahead to chase a kite. It was red. The wind pulled it so high we couldn't see the string anymore. Her voice shook slightly. Thrun was quiet. He didn't know what to say. I tried to remember it all, Mina said, so I don't forget what we're fighting for. You think drawing memories will help you win? He asked gently. No, she said, but it helps me stay human. Thrun looked down at the floor. The drawings were simple, lines, shapes, but to her, they were everything. That evening, Thrun returned to his room and sat alone. He opened a small metal box from his past. A personal keepsake most Dravari soldiers didn't talk about. Inside was an old tag, worn from age. It belonged to his mentor, a warrior who had trained him as a child. His mentor had once told him, victory means nothing if you forget who you are. At the time, Thrun hadn't understood. He thought strength came from power, from control, from making others fear you. That was the Dravari way. Or so he had believed. But now, he wasn't sure. He placed the tag on the table and looked out the window. Stars moved slowly past the ship. He asked himself a question he had never asked before. What are we fighting for? The next day, Thrun brought something with him to the cell, a small container of medical cream and a bandage. Mina looked at it, surprised. I noticed your leg is still bruised, Thrun said. This will help. She hesitated, but then nodded slowly. Thrun knelt and gently applied the cream to her leg. He was quiet, careful. She winced once, but didn't pull away. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Thrun didn't answer right. "Away." Finally, he said, "Because I think I was wrong." Minna tilted her head. "Wrong about what?" "About what makes someone strong." She didn't reply, but her eyes softened just a little. Thrun stood up and looked down at her. "You never screamed. You never begged, even when I gave you pain." Minna nodded slowly. "Pain is not the worst thing." "Then what is?" he asked. "Losing yourself," she said. "Becoming something you're not," Thrun understood. More than ever before. That night, Commander Krall called for Thrun. The commander stood at the edge of the war table, looking over a new report. "The humans attacked another base," he said. "They used codes we thought were secure." Thrun's heart jumped. He remembered the report about Mina's mission. She had carried codes. Maybe they had gotten through. Krall looked at him sharply. "The prisoner, she may know more than we thought. I want a full interrogation. Tomorrow." Thrun stayed silent. "You hesitate," Krall said. "I believe she has no more to give." Thrun replied carefully. Krall's eyes narrowed. "Are you growing soft?" "No, Commander," Thrun said. "Just seeing clearly." Krall waved him away. "Tomorrow. One more try. Then we decide what happens to her." Thrun bowed and left. But his mind was heavy. Back in the hallway, he paused. Outside Mina's cell, she was asleep, curled up on the floor. She looked peaceful. Not like a prisoner, but like a person who had already made peace with herself. Thrun stared through the glass and whispered, "They say you are weak, but you are the strongest one here." And for the first time in his life, Thrun hoped, truly hoped, that someone else's way of seeing the world might be right. The ship was silent, like a deep breath being held. Outside the prisoner deck, red lights flashed. Somewhere in the lower engine room, something had gone wrong. The walls shook gently, a soft hum, like a heartbeat, echoed through the floors. Thrun was walking back from the training room when the lights changed. A voice came through the speaker above him. "Alert! Power disturbance in Sector 9. All crew report to your nearest station." He stopped. Sector 9 was close to the prisoner block. His first thought was of Minna. Without a word, Thrun turned and ran. Inside her cell, Minna held the bars as the floor trembled beneath her. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere nearby, something heavy crashed. The lights above flickered once, then again. She didn't know what was happening, but she stayed calm. Fear wouldn't help. Then she heard it, a soft, high cry. It was coming from the hallway. Minna pressed her face to the small window in her door. At the far end of the hall, one of the guard doors had opened during the shake. Inside, she saw a small figure, a Dravari hatchling, no older than 5 or 6, curled under a pipe. He was alone. Smoke drifted near him from a broken panel. The little one was shaking, eyes wide with fear. Minna didn't think. She called out, her voice strong and clear, "Hey, it's okay. I'm here." The hatchling looked up. "I need you to come toward me," she said gently. "Can you walk?" He shook his head. The pipe above him groaned, metal bending under pressure. Minna looked around her cell. No tools, no key, nothing but the window. Then footsteps, fast, heavy. Thrun appeared at the end of the hallway. He ran past the cell and stopped near the hatchling. The young Dravari tried to move but was too scared. Thrun bent down, speaking softly in their language. He lifted the child into his arms just as the pipe above gave way and fell with a crash. For a second, there was only silence. Then the child began to cry. Thrun held him close and turned toward Mina's cell. She looked at him, not with fear, but with relief. "You came fast," she said. "I heard the alert," Thrun replied. "But I also felt something else, something pulling me here." He glanced down at the hatchling, then back at her. "You tried to help him," he said. Minna nodded. "He's just a child. Doesn't matter whose side he's on." Thrun stood still, holding the young one. That moment changed something in him. Again, Minna hadn't thought twice. She had only seen a scared life, not an enemy, and he, a trained warrior, had hesitated for 1 second. He whispered, You could have escaped. That door was open. Minna gave a small smile. But the child needed help more than I needed freedom. Thrun took the hatchling to the med bay, then returned to the cell area. The shaking had stopped, but inside him, something had begun. He couldn't stop thinking about her words. Doesn't matter whose side he's on. Back at her cell. He opened the door quietly and stepped inside. Minna was sitting on the floor. Again, drawing once more with her finger. This time, she made a small shape like a flame. "What is that?" Thrun asked. "A spark," she replied. "Just a small one. But it can grow." Thrun sat down across from her. "You could have left, but you didn't. I still believe in something," Minna said. "And what's that?" She looked him in the eyes. "That people can change." Thrun leaned back against the wall. Not many would say that to a soldier from the army that hurt. "Your world." "You didn't hurt my world," Minna replied. "You're just part of something, same as me. But now, maybe we're part of something else." Thrun was quiet. Minna continued. "War teaches you to see only enemies. But sometimes, when you look closer, you find people." He looked at her closely. Her face still showed signs of pain. Her legs still bore the bruise he had caused. But her eyes were not full of hate. They were full of hope. "How can you still hope after everything?" he asked. "Because if I don't," Minna said, "then they win." Later that day, Thrun went to speak with Commander Krall again. About the prisoner, Thrun began, choosing his words carefully. "She saved one of our young. She had a chance to run. But she didn't." Krall raised an eyebrow. "So, she's not just a prisoner." Thrun said, "She's more. She's trying to show us something. I think we should listen." Krall gave a deep laugh. "You think she's here to teach us peace?" Thrun didn't flinch. "I think she's here to remind us we have a choice." Krall stood up slowly. "You're changing, Thrun." "I'm growing," he replied. Krall narrowed his eyes, too. "Much heart makes a soldier soft, or stronger," Thrun answered. There was a long silence. Then Krall waved him off. "Do what you like. But if she steps out of line, I'll end it myself." Thrun nodded. "She won't." That night, Thrun returned to Minna's cell, but not to question her. He brought her clean water, a small blanket, and a roll of paper. "What's this for?" she asked. "To draw your memories," he said. "Not on the floor." Minna smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you." They sat in silence as she began to sketch, and Thrun watched. He didn't see a prisoner anymore. He saw something more, a spark dot, and for the first time, he let it warm. Something deep inside him. The stars outside the ship moved slowly, like quiet dancers across the black sky. Inside the warship Vork's will, all seemed calm on the surface. But inside Commander Krall's mind, a storm was building. He sat at his desk, reading afresh. A report from the outer colonies. Another supply base had been hit by human fighters. They moved quickly, with strange knowledge of Dravari travel paths and code systems. This was no accident. Someone had helped them. Someone had shared inside knowledge. Krall narrowed his eyes. There was only one explanation. The human girl. Thrun was sitting by Minna's cell, watching her sketch a mountain on the paper he had brought. It was simple, with a small sun rising behind. "That's where we hid once," she said. "We stayed in a cave for days. My group had no food, just rainwater. But we waited until it was safe. Then we moved again. You remember every place?" Thrun asked. Minna nodded. "I draw them so I don't forget. I don't want the world I love to disappear, even if I never see it again." Thrun didn't know what to say. Every word she spoke made him question his world more. Before he could reply, the sharp sound of metal boots echoed through the hallway. Commander Krall appeared at the end of the corridor, followed by two guards. Minna quickly stood. Thrun did to Krall, stepped in front of the cell and stared at Minna through the bars. "You sent a message, didn't you?" Minna looked confused. "What message?" "You told them where to strike," Krall said, voice low and dangerous. "Don't lie." "I've been locked in this cell," Minna replied calmly. "I haven't spoken to anyone but him." She glanced at THRN. Krall turned to him. Then, maybe he gave the message. Thrun took a step forward. "Commander, she didn't do this. She didn't even try to escape when the ship lost power. She helped save a hatchling. Crawl ignored him. Bring her to the chamber. He ordered the guards. Now, no. Thrun stood between them. She's done nothing wrong, Crawl. Looked at him carefully. You've grown too close. I've grown wise, Thrun said. She's not the enemy you think she is. Crawl's eyes turned cold. You've betrayed your duty. Before Thrun could move, the guards pushed him aside and entered the cell. They grabbed Minna by her arms. She didn't fight back. Her face was calm. But her eyes showed sadness. Don't do this, Thrun said. She will be judged, Crawl replied. You will stand down. As they dragged Minna away, Thrun looked into her eyes one last time. She didn't scream. She didn't speak. But her quiet glance said everything. Minna sat alone in the center of the chamber. A single light above made her shadow long and thin. The walls were gray and cold. No windows, no sound, only silence. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She sat still. She had been through worse. But she wondered what would happen next. Thrun paced back and forth in his quarters. His hands were shaking. He couldn't stop thinking about her face, the calm way she accepted what was happening, the trust she had placed in him, and how he had failed her. He opened his desk and pulled out a small communicator dot. He had seen how she drew maps from memory. He remembered her drawing of the mountain dot. If she trusted him, then maybe he could trust her to dot, and maybe he could make things right. That night, Thrun made his choice. He took off his armor and replaced it with a technician's uniform. It was less guarded, easier to move in. He carried a toolkit with a small pass device, stolen from the maintenance room. He moved quickly through the lower decks, avoiding cameras when he could. When he reached the chamber entrance, a single guard stood at the door. Thrun walked up with confidence. I was told to check the panel inside. Power flickered near this area during the last system error. The guard frowned. I didn't get that order. Thrun held up the pass device. Check with engineering if you like. But if something goes wrong in this sector again, it'll be your fault. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Thrun entered quickly. Minna sat up as the door opened. She expected Crawl, or worse. Instead, she saw Thrun. He rushed to her side and unlocked the cuffs on her wrists. Come on, he whispered. We're leaving. Minna blinked. Why? Because you don't deserve this, Thrun said. And I can't keep watching without doing something. But what about your people? Thrun paused. I don't know, but I believe in something now. Something more than orders. Minna stood up. Her legs were weak, but steady. Then let's go. They moved fast through the tunnels. Thrun knew the quiet paths, service doors, and old storage routes not often used. Alarms stayed silent. Cameras stayed dark. At last, they reached the lower maintenance bay. Inside, small escape pods were used for repairs in space. Most were guarded, but one was broken during last month's training and left for scrap. Thrun had fixed it, just in case. He opened the hatch. You'll be safe once you leave the ship, he said. Minna looked at him. What about you? I'll stay, he replied. I need to face what I've done. But if you get out, maybe there's still hope. Minna stepped inside, then turned back. Why did you change? She asked. Thrun looked at her. Because you didn't. He pressed the launch button, and the hatch closed slowly. Minna gave one last look, not of fear, but of thanks. Then the pod launched into the stars. Back inside the ship, alarms began to sound minutes later. Crawl stood at the control deck, eyes on the screen. Escape pod 9, an officer said. Unauthorized launch. Crawl stared at the screen. Who was inside? The officer hesitated. The human and someone else were checking. Crawl's hands tightened into fists, but deep inside, he felt something he hadn't in years, doubt. The small escape pod moved silently through space, outside the thick glass window. Stars flickered like distant fires. Inside, Minna sat still, her hands folded in her lap. The hum of the engines was soft but steady. She thought about everything that had happened, the long journey to this moment, the pain in her leg, the unexpected kindness from Thrun, and now, this chance at freedom. The pod's controls showed the ship behind them growing smaller with every second. She wasn't sure where the pod would take her, only that it was away from the Vork's well. Away from the war dot back on the warship, Thrun stood alone in the dim hallway. The alarms blared around him, but he felt calm. He had done what he believed was right. Now. The future was uncertain. He turned toward the command deck, his footsteps echoing softly. The corridors felt emptier than before. The ship had changed, not in its walls, but in the silence between. Thrun knew he would be called to answer for his actions, but deep inside, he was ready. Meanwhile, in the escape pod, Minna watched the stars with quiet hope. Suddenly, the pod's system beeped softly. A message flashed on the screen. Nearby planet detected. Surface breathable. Coordinates locked. Minna's heart beat faster. She pressed a button to begin descent. The pod shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Outside, green and blue, spread beneath like a painted canvas. Minutes later, the pod landed gently in a clearing surrounded by tall trees. Minna took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh, different from the recycled air inside the pod. She opened the hatch and stepped. Outside, the ground was soft beneath her feet, covered in moss and small flowers. Above, birds sang songs she had never heard before. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. On the ship, Commander Krall stormed into the command room. Officers stood at their stations, eyes wide with worry. "Find that pod," Krall barked. "Track it to the planet." An officer nodded and began typing commands. "Prepare a squad for immediate launch," Krall ordered. "We can't let her escape." Thrun watched from the shadows. He clenched his fists. He knew what had to be done. Minna walked through the farce carefully, her mind racing. She needed to survive, to find others who might help, to warn them about the war that was coming. As she moved deeper into the trees, she heard a faint noise, a rustling. She froze. Out of the bushes stepped a group of people, humans. They wore simple clothes, and their eyes were wide with surprise. One of them stepped forward. "Who are you?" Minna held up her hands. "I'm Minna. I'm from Earth." The group exchanged glances. "We thought no one else was out here," a young woman said. "We've been hiding for years." Minna's heart lifted. She had found others. That night, around a small fire, Minna shared her story. She told them about the war, about the Dravari, and about the ship she escaped from. The people listened closely, their faces filled with fear and hope. "We have to prepare," Minna said. "The war will reach us too." A man nodded. "Then we will fight together." Back on the Vork's will, Thrun made his way to the command room. Commander Krall met him with a cold glare. "You betrayed us," Krall said. "You let her escape." "I did what was right," Thrun replied calmly. Krall stepped closer. "You will be punished." Thrun stood tall. "Maybe, but I don't regret it." Krall's eyes burned with anger. But Thrun didn't back down. "I will find a way to end this war," Thrun said. "Not with more pain, but with understanding." Krall laughed bitterly. "You're a fool." "Maybe," Thrun said, "but a fool with hope." Meanwhile, on the new planet, Minna and the small group prepared. They built shelters, trained with old weapons, and shared stories of home. Minna drew new maps, marking safe paths and places to avoid. She knew the fight was only beginning, but she was no longer alone. Days later, the ship's sensors picked up strange signals from the planet. Krall's face twisted in frustration. "This is not over," he said. Thrun watched quietly. He believed that the true battle was not in the stars, but in the hearts of those who dared to choose peace. The sun rose slowly over the peaceful planet. Warm light spilled through the trees and touched the small camp, where Minna and her new friends had made their home. Birds sang in the morning air, and the soft rustle of leaves carried the promise of a new day. Minna stood outside her shelter, looking toward the horizon. The war was far away now, but she knew it would not be forgotten. The memories of pain, loss, and hope lived deep inside her heart. Far above, in the cold darkness of space, the warship Vorks hovered silently near the planet's orbit. Commander Krall sat in the command room, his face hard and unreadable. The ship's sensors scanned the planet below. searching for signs of the humans who had escaped. But he also knew something had changed. One of his own, Thrun, had chosen a different path. Krall's thoughts were troubled. Was the war truly the only way? Inside the camp, Minna taught the people what she had learned. She showed them how to use the land, how to build shelter, and how to work together. She told stories of Earth, a place filled with both light and darkness, but also with hope. Her small group grew stronger each day. And with each new sunrise, Minna believed more in a future where peace was possible. One afternoon, while exploring near a river, Minna spotted a small craft descending toward the planet. Her heart raced. She gathered the group and moved quietly to a safe place. The craft landed with a gentle hum. The door opened, and a figure stepped out. It was Thrn. He looked tired but determined. Minna ran toward him, relief flooding her. "We thought you were lost," she said. Thrn smiled softly. "I had to leave, but I never stopped believing in what you started." He looked around at the camp and the people working together. "This place, it is more than a refuge. It is hope." Thrun explained how he had left the warship after refusing to follow orders that would harm innocent lives. He had joined a small group of soldiers who shared his belief that the future could be different. Together, they had found a way to reach the planet and help Minna and the others. Commander Krall, back on the ship, had grown isolated. His harsh methods had lost the support of many, but even he could not ignore the changes happening below. Some of his own had begun to question the endless war. He watched the peaceful planet through the viewports and wondered if there was another way. Days passed, and Minna and Thrun worked side by side to build a new community. The people shared stories, skills, and dreams. They planted seeds that would grow into food and hope. They healed old wounds and learned to trust again. One evening, as the sun set, behind the trees, Minna and Thrun stood looking at the stars. "Do you think they will come for us?" Minna asked quietly. Thrun nodded. "Some will, but not all. We have to be ready," Minna said. "But also remember why we fight." Thrun smiled. "For peace, for a new dawn." Suddenly, the sky brightened. Ships from the Vorkswil appeared above the planet, but they did not attack. Instead, a message came through the camp's communicator. It was Commander Krall. "I have seen your courage," his voice said, "and I want to speak. There may be a way to end this war." Minna and Thrun exchanged surprised looks. A meeting was arranged on neutral ground. When Krall arrived, he was not the cold commander everyone feared. He was a man tired of war, willing to listen. Minna spoke first. "We want peace, Commander. Not just for us, but for everyone." Krall nodded slowly. "I see now that strength is not only in weapons, it is in understanding." The talks lasted many days. They were difficult and full of old fears. But slowly, a new path opened. They agreed to a ceasefire. They promised to work toward peace. Back on Earth, the story of Minna and Thrun became a symbol of hope. People everywhere began to believe that even in the darkest times, change was possible, that even when hurt ran deep, kindness could heal. As the new dawn broke over the planet, Minna looked at the horizon. She knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. Not just from chains or war, but free to dream, free to build, free to live. The end.